All right, good evening. You might take your Bibles and turn to Leviticus 9. Leviticus 9. And I think that's where we're ready to study tonight. And it is good to see you. I think we have, well, you can tell we have a lot out, but for various and sundry reasons. But glad that you're here, and hopefully some are able to take advantage of the online video stream to be able to listen in tonight. So we are studying right now the period at kind of the second part of the time at Mount Sinai. And on the first day of the first month of the second year, when the children of Israel came up out of Israel, after they'd been at Sinai for several months, they come to the point where they set up the tabernacle. And once they set up the tabernacle, as we looked at last time, there are 7 days of priestly initiation, where the priests are ordained and consecrated in order to be able to serve in their role in the tabernacle. And for the first 12 days of that month, the chiefs of the various tribes bring their offerings to the tabernacle to be used in that kind of initial series of worship services of offerings that are made there at the tabernacle. Getting everything set up and kind of laying the groundwork for the worship that will go forward. Now, chronologically, the next thing we ought to talk about is what we're talking about tonight, chapters 9 and 10. This all, as far as I understand it, takes place on the 8th day after they set up the tabernacle. So you have that 1 week of priestly ordination. Then in chapter 9, we start with the information about what happens on the 8th day. And so as I understand it, this is the first day of maybe what you would call official or real priestly service. It's not ordination anymore. Here comes the time to set to the work, and we'll see what happens with all of that. Anything by way of introduction?
No.
All right. So why don't we look at chapter 9 and looking at verse 1. On the 8th day, Moses called Aaron and his sons and the elders of Israel, and he said to Aaron, "Take for yourself a bull calf for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without blemish, and offer them before the Lord. And say to the people of Israel, take a male goat for a sin offering, and a calf and a lamb, both a year old, without blemish, for a burnt offering, and an ox and a ram for peace offerings, to sacrifice before the Lord, and a grain offering mixed with oil, for today the Lord will appear to you." And they brought what Moses commanded in front of the tent of meeting, and all the congregation drew near and stood before the Lord. And Moses said, "This is the thing that the Lord commanded you to do, that the glory of the Lord may appear to you." Then Moses said to Aaron, "Draw near to the altar, and offer your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and for the people, and bring the offering of the people, and make atonement for them as the Lord has commanded." All right, so there's several different offerings that are going to be offered on this day, but I think we can kind of broadly break them down into 2 categories. What was the first set of offerings going to be for? A sin offering for whom? For the priests and then for the people. That's right. So this is a very important point that we should make, and we may make several times again as we go through the book of Leviticus as we overview it. In Hebrews chapter 5, the Hebrew writer makes the point that what a priest does is offer sacrifices on behalf of the people. That's basically what it means to be a priest. But for whom must he first offer sacrifices before he can offer sacrifices for the people? For himself. And that was a limitation of that Levitical Old Testament Aaronic priesthood. There was a limitation there, and that was that the priest had to offer a sacrifice for himself before he could offer a sacrifice for the sins of the people. And one of the benefits of that, I say a benefit, the way the Hebrew writer frames it is, he could sympathize with the weaknesses of the people that he was representing, because he himself, in fact, was beset with those weaknesses. But we have a better high priest. A high priest who, even though he was tempted in all points as we are, was without sin, Hebrews 4:14 tells us. And that creates the ability for him to be able to sympathize with us, not because he's experienced sin, but because he's experienced the fullest pressure of temptation and not given in. And so we see here the Levitical priesthood and the recognition that even Aaron and even his sons are having to offer sacrifices for themselves, but we look forward knowing how the next order of things will be, knowing that we have a high priest who did not have to make an offering for himself first. He was able to offer himself because he was, as these sacrifices were called to be, without blemish. Anything through verse 7 or so, Mr. Dwight?
Always when they made offerings, if it was more than one offering or multiple offerings, the sin offering was always first. And then the burnt offering followed that. And then there was the peace offerings. And so if you ever notice that, that's the way it always happened.
Yeah, and that's interesting because the sin has to be dealt with before anything else can.
Right.
And then the burnt, I think, would indicate complete dedication.
Yes.
And then the grain offering, if I remember correctly, this is one of the only ones that the offerer eats a part of.
Yes, exactly.
Now, the priest ate parts of several of them, but the offerer eats part of the grain offering, which maybe pictures a reconciled relationship. But the sin has to be taken care of first, then complete dedication, and then there's a fellowship between God and the worshiper.
Exactly.
There's a lot of pictures and images in that for us in the New Covenant. That's right.
And there was a lot of offerings, a lot of different offerings, and it's hard to keep up with all of them.
That's right. Yeah, and what we'll do is, I think it's next time we start kind of our survey of Leviticus, and one of the things we'll try to do is kind of illustrate some of the differences in these sacrifices, and we'll try to have some handy charts for that and summarize some of those things.
But it's also hard to comprehend, even though it shows that outline of the first group to come. I mean, you take all the tribes and all the animals that had to be sacrificed. I mean, you're talking tons of offerings being offered on just a daily basis. I mean, I don't think we can actually comprehend the amount of offerings that was made, but it was that much sin that had to be atoned for before God.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the pieces of furniture, all the furniture that's made for the tabernacle, and there's a piece missing. There's no chair because there was never an opportunity for the priest to sit down. Their work was never done. And there is a mercy seat, but they couldn't sit on it lest they die. But they wanted a chair for the priest, I should say. But I think it was one commentator said that the altar fires were to never go out so that it would burn on their minds the reality and the seriousness of their sins. And I imagine if you're living in Jerusalem and you look towards the temple, the tabernacle in the temple, you would just see smoke going up practically continuously. And that was to be a burning reminder, literally, of the necessity of blood for sacrifice, and the fact that the Hebrew writer will say, it was a reminder, and he's talking about just the Day of Atonement, which was one day of sacrifice. It was a reminder year by year of the need for sin offerings, and these would be offered. Some of these every day would be offered. So anyway, very good. Anything else through verse 7? All right.
In verses. The next few verses down through verse 14, it describes the offering that Aaron was going to offer for himself and did. In verse 8, we'll read through 14. Aaron therefore went to the altar and killed the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. Then the sons of Aaron brought the blood to him, and he dipped his finger in the blood, put it on the horns of the altar, and poured the blood at the base of the altar. But the fat, the kidneys, and the fatty lobe from the liver of the sin offering he burned on the altar, as the Lord had commanded Moses. The flesh and the hide he burned with fire outside the camp, and he killed the burnt offering, and Aaron's sons presented to him the blood which he sprinkled all around the altar. They presented the burnt offering to him with its pieces and head, and he burned them on the altar, and he washed the entrails and the legs, and burned them with the burnt offering on the altar. So this just describes his offering for himself here. And of course, uh, the sin offering was what? It was the young bull, wasn't it? Young bullock there in verse 8. And the burnt offering was what?
It was actually fat, kidney, and liver. Burnt offering. Oh, burnt offering.
Yes, the burnt offering. It was the ram, correct. And like I said, the sin came before the sin offering came before the burnt offering there. And of course, it describes what he did with all of and with all of the pieces. Um, and as I understand, the burnt offering was completely consumed, right?
Yes, sir.
Everything. It seems like he went through a lot of trouble just to burn it up.
Yeah.
But that's the way it went as it describes here.
Yeah, you have just as you were making mention, there's going to be a little bit of a difference for what the sin offering will be for the people, and I don't know if this is the implication, but it seems that at least with the sin offering, the priest one has to be bigger. It is a bigger sacrifice
Correct.
than the one for the people, but we'll notice that in just a moment. You also see this is that the sons are taking a role here in helping in this. So, we have Aaron, who is the high priest. His sons will serve as priests, and so they will have a part in the offerings, though he will be the only one who will be able to go in on the Day of Atonement. We'll read more about that in chapter 16. But the priests will take a role in that, and then there will be the Levites who will help in the general service of the tabernacle. And so you see both of those roles here. You've got Aaron maybe doing the offerings here, but the sons who are assisting in that as he goes. Anything else that you have through 14? Anything you'd like to say through 14?
The burnt offering, right, was a fellowship offering or dedicated to the Lord.
Yes.
So do you remember Abraham was sacrificing Isaac as a burnt offering?
Yeah.
And so
That's
what
good.
was Abraham's name? A friend of God. Fellowship.
Yeah.
And then the burnt offering was completely gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Abraham believed that even those ashes
Yeah.
could all be put back together and Isaac be resurrected.
Yeah, that's good. That's
So,
really helpful.
if you can imagine the smoke going up and all the ashes of Isaac's body, if you were to offer it, that Abraham believed in God so much he could restore all that.
Yeah.
And then what was offered instead?
A ram.
A ram.
Yeah.
All the correlation.
Yeah, which is exactly what they were supposed to offer for the burnt offering. That's really good. That's helpful.
So,
Yeah.
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I may have two questions.
Oh boy.
So, the first one is why is there a difference in how the blood is used between the sin offering and the burnt offering? Why is one on the horns and at the base and it's on the sides? Do you know?
We're not told.
No, I don't know. I don't know.
I figured they'd done that because that's what God told Moses how he wanted it done.
I
And
didn't know
it meant something to God to be the way that it was done.
Right.
So, okay. So in 9, when he dips his finger and put it on the horns of the altar and poured the blood out at the base of the altar, if I understand correctly, I think Brother Waldron would suggest that was the blood, the horns might be on the altar of incense. Is that right? And then the pouring out at the base would be on the burnt, would be at the altar of burnt offering.
Yeah, the two different ones.
Yeah, the two different. So you have the altar of incense that would actually be inside the tabernacle, and then the base one that would be just outside. But like you're saying, I don't know why one is thrown against the sides, at least specifically. But let me think on that. Maybe I'll have a better answer next time. Because I seem to remember something about that idea of throwing it on the altar, but I don't know right now. So I didn't think about that until you asked, but I'll look into it. But I think pretty much the answer is we don't know. so far. All right. Verse 15. Then he presented the people's offering and took the goat of the sin offering that was for the people and killed it and offered it as a sin offering like the first one. I take that to be like the offering he made for himself, like the sin offering he made for himself. And he presented the burnt offering and offered it according to the rule. And he presented the grain offering, took a handful of it, and burned it on the altar besides the burnt offering of the morning. So the grain offering would be the only non-blood offering, the only one that did not involve the sacrifice of an animal at all. Now, verse 18, then he killed the ox and the ram, the sacrifice of peace offerings for the people, and Aaron's sons handed in the blood, and he threw it against the sides of the altar. But the fat pieces of the ox and of the ram, the fat tail, and that which covers the entrails and the kidneys and the long lobe of the liver, they put the fat pieces on the breast, and he burned the fat pieces on the altar. But the breast and the right thigh Aaron waved or heaved as a wave offering before the Lord, as Moses commanded. So maybe we'll stop there for a moment. You have the next step in this is that there will be a peace offering for the people. So there's the grain offering and then a peace offering, which I think is what it means. It is what it says. It is a sacrifice that indicates that they are in a condition to be in God's presence and that God will be in their presence and that they're not going to be destroyed by the wrath of God. They are at peace, basically. You have anything else on that, verse 21?
No, it's good that we don't have to go through this process. We already, the offering has already been made for us, and it's wonderful that we don't have to do all this ourselves.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that at times God's people were thinking, is there not another way for this? And there was, but it was going to be costly, and he needed to teach these lessons first. And I'm not sure they all learned them, but he was putting them there before them. I think we're ready for 22, if you are.
Okay. Then Aaron lifted his hand toward the people, blessed them, and came down from offering the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of meeting and came out and blessed the people. Then the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. It says that Aaron blessed the people, and they went into the tabernacle of meeting, came back out and blessed them again, and the glory of the Lord appeared at that time. And how did the glory of the Lord appear? Right. Fire came down from God wherever. I think about a lightning bolt when I think of this. God sent fire down, and it completely consumed the offering on the altar and the fat on it. But the people, of course, they shouted and fell on their faces. They were showing this was a show of respect for God and His power, and do you have anything else to say on that?
Just briefly, the fire that comes out and consumes the burnt offering, key in on that word consumes, what does it demonstrate here in verses 22 through 24? He approves. In this case, the consuming fire demonstrates God's approval. That will be important in just a moment. All right. Anything else through chapter 9?
I believe that the fire would be, I know that we relate a lot of time into strength life, but all through up to the time that they got to this point, God actually led them at night by a pillar of fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it also says that during the tabernacle, when the Lord was there, it was a pillar of fire that was above the most holy place. And however that he did it, from that fire actually came the fire out that consumed the offering.
Yeah.
And then later on, we'll see he'll use fire again that will consume some people.
Yeah, I would suggest, and you can do with this what you want to, that probably there's already fire on the altar. Right? They've been making offerings all day long. There's fire there, and I would almost imagine this as not only the glory of the Lord appearing, but an intensification to the point where it's like, oh, well, that's a priest made fire, to the point where it was an undeniably not priest made fire because there was something different about it that indicated that it was God's. So almost the idea that the fire intensifies to the point that it just, instead of just kind of burning the offering like normal, consumes it, just eats it up. And that would be, I think, the picture here of how God demonstrates his pleasure. But yes, fire is a recurring image in all of this. That's right. When the people see the glory of the Lord, what do? Fall on the face. That is a thing, right? And I think one place we might think about is Genesis 17, when the Lord appears to Abraham. And Abraham has had conversations with the Lord before, right? He has heard from God. And when God appears to him, he says, I am the Lord Almighty. And Abraham falls on his face. Even when ungodly people are see the glory of the Lord, they tremble. Mount Sinai, the mountain shakes, and they say, we don't want to hear his voice again, or we will die. You go up there and listen. And so getting a glimpse of the glory of God is something that struck people and should strike us in as much as we see his glory, not in a physical way, but through the word and in the face of Jesus Christ as we reflect on the Gospels and things like that. Okay, very good. Anything else through chapter 9? Again, I think it will be helpful when we go back and kind of talk more details about what these offerings look like. We don't have to recreate these, fortunately, but I think it is helpful to get a picture of the kinds of things that these people were doing. So we come to chapter 10, and as far as I know, in all of Leviticus, there is one narrative. There's one account of events that happens. The rest of the book of Leviticus is like what we just read as far as instructions, and of course there's narrative worked into that because Aaron is offering these. But as far as just telling us a story, a true story of events that really happened, Leviticus 10, I think, is the only one. And in this case, there's a powerful lesson, and we'll notice that here. So let's go ahead and read verses 1 through 3. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered, the English Standard Version says unauthorized fire. Your translation probably says strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord has said, among those who are near me I will be sanctified, and before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. Okay, so Nadab and Abihu, potentially in the excitement of everything that's going on, decide that this would be an occasion for them to bring fire and put it on the altar. I think on the altar of incense we're talking about here. And what kind of fire do they bring? Yeah, strange, unauthorized. I think the description at the end of verse 1 is helpful, which he had not commanded them. And basically, you could flip over. In fact, we ought to do this. I think we have the time for this. If we run out of time, I will regret saying that. In Exodus 30 and verse 9, we have some instructions there. This is the New American Standard. You shall not offer any strange incense on this altar, or burnt offering or meal offering, and you shall not pour out a drink offering on it. Over in Leviticus 16 and verse 12, he shall take fire pan full of coals of fire from upon the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground sweet incense, and bring it inside the veil. So that's where they're supposed to get the fire. And Exodus 30 and verse 9 says, don't offer unauthorized fire. Don't offer strange fire. Now, how would they know what non-strange fire authorized fire was versus what strange fire, unauthorized fire. How will they know the difference?
Because Moses actually give them what God had commanded them how to do everything in the
That's right.
worship to
Yes.
Him.
All right. So here's the instruction to offer fire. Now, don't offer strange fire. Well, how do we know which one's strange and which one's normal, not strange? Well, here's what the not strange fire looks like. And he describes that. Anything else is strange fire. Anything other than what he describes there is strange fire. Now, I do think we ought to note that he tells them, don't do anything different than what I've told you to do. I think he's given us warnings like that. Whoever goes too far and doesn't abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. But my interest here is that how are they supposed to know? And the way they were supposed to know is that the silence of God told them what kinds of fire were strange fire. It was so sometimes when we talk about the silence of Scripture, God does not say that we can do certain things. Somebody says, well, just because he doesn't say not to, I think the case is this. He tells us what to do, right? And that's the thing that pleases him. It's not that we're, I don't, maybe I'm not doing a good job of explaining this, except for when we don't use, for example, instrumental music. It is really in part because God didn't say that we could, but really he has told us what to do. He's told us to sing. And we know that that pleases him. And we don't do something else because we don't want to offer something strange. We don't want to offer something unauthorized. We don't want to offer something not what he commanded. We want to do what he has told us to do. And that's a powerful lesson. And so if there's one narrative in the book of Leviticus, we ought to pay attention. And I think in all of these instructions, similar principles would apply, right? When God gives an instruction, don't do something different than that. Do what he has said.
Haven't they been doing something similar, like leading up to this, but
Yes.
7 days in a row?
That's right.
So they knew the pattern
Yes.
before this happened.
I agree with that. And so, anyway, yes,
And the other thing is, I don't think it's the silent part what they're supposed to be doing. Because since it was so much detail given on each thing they do, even this incense to be brought and where to get the fire from. It's the same thing today, and God telling us and Jesus on how to take the Lord's Supper.
sure.
I mean, it's grape juice for the blood and unleavened bread for the body. And I think in this case, because after this, as they went on through doing what they're supposed to at the tabernacle, none of them got killed for using the wrong stuff and the wrong incense and how to do it. So I believe in the writings that Moses, even though we don't have a full list of the whole items that were done, but as we've seen when they did do it, even when we wasn't told in steps how it was done until after the fact they done it, they already was given the method by Moses from God on how to do it.
Yeah, I think they had clear instructions. I think you're right. Now, we can make several points about this. Hebrews chapter 12 says, our God is a consuming fire. We are not under any less weight to do things how God instructed us. It's not as if we're part of a new covenant and, well, we need to worry less about that. I think we should be more concerned about this. If this was an earthly covenant given on a physical mountain, how much more the spiritual covenant given from the mouth of Jesus. Now, what did their failure to do what God had instructed demonstrate about their attitude towards God? They did not regard him as holy. And so somebody says, well, it doesn't matter how you worship, it's just about your heart. It is about your heart. It's all, yeah, it is. But the way we worship reveals our hearts. And whether whether our attitude is bad or whether our actions are bad, well, those things generally go hand in hand. By those who come near me, I will be treated as holy. I will be glorified. And their actions demonstrated that's not what they were doing. And the fire came out, and the same word that's in chapter 9 consumed them. Now this time, what does the fire consuming indicate? Disapproval. God's judgment, his condemnation. So, you have God's fire, and if we are in line with that, God's fire demonstrates His approval. And if we're out of step with that, it indicates His disapproval.
And it also shows that when Moses, when he spoke to Aaron, that Aaron was fixed to do something that he shouldn't do because it was his two sons, and Moses told him that, God will be glorified.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, we don't have any indication of what Aaron was going to do, but maybe Moses kind of cuts him off and keeps him from doing something and says, and it tells us he held his peace, which, even with Moses' instruction, was he accepts the judgment of God.
And he's also fulfilling a certain role right now.
That's right.
Where maybe that would be appropriate.
Yes, I agree.
And it's not that mourning at all is not appropriate because we see some of our
But maybe in this instance, to mourn would almost give the indication that he doesn't think this is right or fair. And it shows to me, I think, that he accepts that God's judgment was just, even if it was painful. Okay, so as we progress, Mr. Dwight, you got anything through those three verses?
So when we do what we want to do,
Yeah.
God is not glorified.
That's right.
Yeah. And it's amazing to me that people want to argue about that.
I agree. 1 Peter 4:11. If any man speak, let him speak as the oracles of God. If any man serve with the strength that God gives him, that in all things God may be glorified.
Right.
When we say things and we're saying God's things, they better actually be God's things so that He gets the glory.
And this is the same God that we worship.
That's right. Absolutely. Austin.
I was just gonna, I don't know if this is worth pointing out, but I'm trying to. Okay. So what we have here is you have an institution of new people, like God's people. And you have an example pretty early made by God of what's acceptable, what's not in this. And like you said, this is a hard problem. I just think it's interesting when we get to the New Testament and we have kind of the institution of God's new people.
Yeah.
We have a very similar situation with Ananias and Sapphira.
Yeah.
Where if you're looking at their actions, just like here, you're looking at their actions, you're saying, hey, they're trying to do a good thing. But the problem is not, what they were trying to do is how they were going about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I think he made the message clear here to the Israelites. There are right and wrong ways to do things, and I think he tried to do that in the Testament as well.
Yeah. I take it from the prophets that God did not strike down every person who offered a sacrifice wrongly, right? Because it appears that there were a lot of wrongly offered sacrifices. To the point where God says, I wish somebody would shut the doors. So He doesn't just keep striking people down as they do it incorrectly or with bad attitude or don't treat Him with reverence. But He does it here, and He's doing that to teach. I doubt that, I don't think God has struck down every time somebody has contributed with bad motives. But He did at the beginning, and He's teaching us through that. Okay.
Okay, let's read 4-7 here. Then Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, is that right? The uncle of Aaron, and said to them, come near, carry your brethren from before the sanctuary out of the camp. So they went near and carried them by their tunics out of the camp, as Moses had said. And Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar, his sons, do not uncover your heads, nor tear your clothes, lest you die, and wrath come upon all the people. But let your brethren, the whole house of Israel, bewail the burning which the Lord has kindled. You shall not go out from the door of the tabernacle of meeting, lest you die, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. And they did according to the word of Moses. So Moses has a couple of first cousins here that he orders to carry the two dead men away from there. And it says in verse 5, I noticed this, and I thought it was interesting. So they went near and carried them by their tunics out of the camp. So they weren't consumed, right? Because their tunics were still on them. I'm not thinking it was probably like a bolt of lightning that killed them. If they were consumed, the tunics would have been consumed. I don't know. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, there was something to carry out.
There was something left.
There was something.
And if it was a fire, the tunics would be gone. That's just my curiosity working there. And of course, Moses told his two sons that they weren't to wail and show mourning. And he was afraid that wrath would come upon all the people if they did, but they're to be examples to the other people. Uh, uh, as and they were to remain in the tabernacle also, and but it says they did according to the word of Moses. You got anything else on that?
No, sir. Anybody else through 7? Tied with that, he gives them some more instructions in verses 8 and 9, 8 through 10. He says, the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations. Some have suggested that maybe this indicates that Nadab and Abihu were under the influence when they made their decision. I don't know about that. It is interesting that this is put in the context here. I would say that what it is at least doing is recognizing the seriousness and the danger of the task that they're putting their hand to, and that they need sobriety when they're involving themselves in that task. That there is no room for being flippant or careless or even not having your wits about you as you approach this. So maybe it's about carelessness. Maybe it's about intoxication. Maybe that's part of it. But I think certainly the instruction here is you want all your faculties working when you come into God's presence, because you've just seen what happens. Now in verse 10, you are to distinguish between the holy and the common, and between the clean and the unclean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that the Lord has spoken to them by Moses. So the priests, not only was their role to be offerers on the part of the people to God, but also to represent God to the people through teaching. You'll see that in other places. But one of the key ways we see that is in the priest's failure to do that. As you go through the prophets, time after time, Hosea 4 and verse 6, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And he puts the weight of that in the context of Hosea 4:6 on the priests, that the priests have failed to do their job of teaching. And there are other places as well. But this was a great responsibility they had been given. And we see the priests and the Levites during the return from captivity, for example, during the days of Ezra, they were the ones who would go out and teach and explain the law to the people. So not only the offerings, but also making discernments between holy and common things, and then also to teach the people what God had given them to do.
Well, even if the Levites was teaching the people, later on it teaches that the people were to teach their children and always keep it before them on writings and teach it on a daily basis so that they would remember it before they actually went back and the reading of the law was brought before the people.
Yes.
The downfall could be more than just the priest of the Levi tribe. If the parents and the members didn't do their part in teaching the law and keeping what God had told them in the teachings. I mean, you can even take it today. I mean, people going to church and going out, and if you don't talk about it daily and focus that during your life, the people in each family can actually lose touch with what God actually commands.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, it's not completely on the priests and Levites, but this is a job that's entrusted to them, and the prophets oftentimes put the weight of the people's lack of knowledge on them because they were the leaders, and they were supposed to be the shepherds in one sense, Ezekiel 34 says, and they didn't do their job. All right, 12 through 15. I'm regretting my statement about having plenty of time. I wonder if 12 through 15 might be a place we could summarize. Basically, they were to take the grain offering and the peace offering and eat that. Now, that's going to create a concern beginning in verse 16 about another portion of the offering. And if you want to take us through that, that'd be great.
Verse 16, then Moses made careful inquiry about the goat of the sin offering, and there it was, burned up. And he was angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, the sons of Aaron, who were left, saying, why have you not eaten the sin offering in a holy place, since it is most holy? And God has given it to you to bear the guilt of the congregation, to make atonement for them before the Lord. See its blood was not brought inside the holy place. Indeed, you should have eaten it in a holy place. So they had done something that upset Aaron. And what was that?
They didn't follow through with what God had actually commanded them to eat it.
Yes, they were supposed to eat part of the offering, or the offering that was burned up, and it was gone. And we're going to see as we finish 19, verse 19, that why the reason was given by Aaron that this happened. But Moses is very upset. He thinks they've done something wrong and they're going to make God mad again. And but I imagine that through what just happened, they got distracted, and that fire, that offering was burning, and they of course they just go ahead and read verse 19.
Yeah. So Aaron said to Moses, "Behold, today they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord, and yet such things as these have happened to me. If I had eaten the sin offering today, would the Lord have approved?" And when Moses heard that, he approved. Is that what your text says?
Yes,
He approved.
yes.
Okay.
He was content.
Yeah. So I agree. So I think what happens here, Moses comes and knows that the sin offering is supposed to be eaten. So in Leviticus chapter 6 and verse 26, we have that instruction. Now, I don't know that we get a full explanation here of why Aaron thinks this. But I think basically what Aaron does is, based on the events of the day, I don't think it would have been appropriate to eat. In verse 10, remember, they were given the responsibility for discerning between what was holy and what was common. And I think this is part of him exercising that discernment. I think it's part of him thinking through what would be the right thing to do here and making a decision. And I think when it says Moses was contented or Moses approved, that he says, Aaron, you're right about that. Now, what I think is going on here, and I might be wrong about this, so just keep that in mind. Leviticus 6, verse 26. The priest who offers it for sin shall eat it. It shall be eaten in a holy place in the court of the tent of meeting. The priest who offers it. I don't know, but I think that the priest who offered it might have just been carried out. And I'm not sure. I think Aaron is thinking, it's not my right and it's not appropriate for me to eat it because I'm not the priest who offered it. And I don't know, but that makes sense to me how that fits together with how Aaron responds. They've offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before the Lord. If I had eaten it, would the Lord have approved? And I think basically those what are those English people? Pronouns. Those pronouns, they offered it. It was their sin offering. It was their burnt offering. If I had eaten it, would the Lord have approved? And when Moses hears that, he says, okay, I understand. Now, it's interesting here because most of the time we've got Moses giving instructions to Aaron. And even sometimes Moses getting on to Aaron and it being Aaron being, but here I think Aaron says, well, think about what happened, Moses, and explains it. And I believe that Moses' approval indicates God's approval. Now, we don't have any more clarification on that. God may have thought, well, they should have gone and eaten it, but maybe they would have been consumed with fire if they had. But anyway.
Have you ever noticed back in verse 8, it says the Lord spoke to Aaron there.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And he's always been speaking to Moses.
Yeah, I need to highlight that. That's good.
And this is the first time that he's ever spoke to Aaron directly.
That's helpful. Almost as if there's a new phase here. That I mean, Moses is still going to receive instruction, but this is Aaron's work now. That's good. All right. Well, we are right at time. Anybody have any comments or questions?
In 16, where Moses made careful entries, so Moses realizes that it's not going to be careful.
Yeah, he's doing an investigation. And, let me suggest this. This is not the only time where Moses will see something that goes on that he's very concerned about. He will go and he will get clarification and he'll say, all right, do you remember the time where the 2.5 tribes that were on the eastern side of the Jordan River were going to set up an altar? I think they called it the altar of Ed. Isn't that right? They're going to set that altar up. And Moses says, what are we doing here? And is it Moses? Or is this Joshua? I think it's Moses. I think we're at that point. Boy, I'm not a good Bible. Anyway, Moses or Joshua gets real upset and they say, "What are you doing? You're already reverting to idol worship." And they say, "No, let's explain." And then I actually think it's Joshua now that say that, so just forget it. It's a good thing time's out because I'm sweating.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.